Good morning, everyone. Oh, the class even responded. Great. Welcome to the second day of this World Women's Conference. And thank you all for yesterday. I had an amazing time meeting people I've met before, reconnecting, but perhaps even more amazing, meeting people I haven't met before. Listening to you, to your opinions, to your thoughts, to your experiences, it has done a lot for me, and I'm looking forward for more of it today and tomorrow. Before we continue, I want to do a little exercise. I see some people are still standing, so if everyone can sit down. Almost. Because I said there are people here that I'm seeing for the first time. I would like everyone who is at their first EI event to stand up. You deserve that applause, and all of you sitting, take a good look at those people standing and make sure that you get to know one of them before you leave here. Thank you all. It is so important that you're here, and I hope this isn't the last time. Some of you may know that Education International 2 weeks ago celebrated its 25th anniversary. So we're grown up now, I think. Through all those 25 years, we have been led by our General Secretary, Fred van Leeuwen. He is the General Secretary that has made it possible for us to have these World Women's Conferences. He is the General Secretary that has made it possible for us to put in place the structures we have for women, the policies we have for women. And he's also traveled the world and met with an awful lot of our affiliates. So I would like to welcome Fred to the stage to share some of his thoughts and his experiences on working with gender equality through the 25 years he's been General Secretary of Education International. Fred, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Haldis. Colleagues, it's a great pleasure for me to see so many of you here at this third edition of Education International World Women's Conference. Some time ago, I read in a Mexican newspaper about a woman, Manuela Hernandez Velazquez, and how she succeeded to complete primary school in a small town near Mexico City at the age of 100. As a young girl, she was forced to become a child laborer, but her whole life she wanted to return to school. Finally, she was offered the opportunity of taking part in a public education program for adults. And when she came up to the stage to receive her diploma, she could hardly walk, her teacher said. Manuela thought she had achieved one of the most important goals in her life on that day. The gate to knowledge, to freedom, to independence, which had closed her out for almost 1 century, had finally been unlocked. At last, the wall had come down. And I was struck by this story. First, because it reminded me of my own mother, who died almost 2 years ago at the age of 95, and who was never given an opportunity either to complete primary school. As a young boy, I felt somewhat embarrassed by this, despite the fact that I did not know anybody who read more books and who was as eager as she was to acquire knowledge and to learn. Now, it did not take long for my embarrassment to turn into indignation when it dawned to me that it was not the inability to learn or indifference that had kept her out of school, but the simple fact that she was the child of refugees, that she was poor, and that she was a girl. It must have been one of my first confrontations with inequality and injustice, and that feeling of indignation has never left me. But Manuela's story is, of course, especially a stark reminder of our long struggle for free education, for a strong and self-confident teaching profession, for solid public school systems, and for quality and equity. As you know, and Haldis reminded you of this year we are celebrating Education International's 25th anniversary. Let me take a moment to reflect on some of the work we have done to get closer to that simple goal that brings us together here in Marrakech: gender equality everywhere. And let me then start by saying that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4, achieving inclusive and equitable quality education for all, which today is the single most powerful tool we have to bring about gender justice, that this Sustainable Development Goal would not exist without the persistence of EI and its affiliates, without our advocacy, without our campaigns, and without the political pressure we were able to exert on all UN member states. When EI was founded in 1993, that was the same year when at the Vienna United Nations World Conference on Human Rights, women from all over the world testified openly and emotionally about the physical and sexual violence they suffered at home. The Vienna conference was the first time that women's rights were formally recognized as human rights. Fast forward 25 years, and as Susan mentioned yesterday, the Me Too movement has shocked us into recognizing that sexual harassment, abuse, and violence at home, in school, at the workplace, and in the streets will no longer go unchecked. And colleagues, this new momentum challenges us to mobilize for effective, supportive, and representative unions strong enough to continue lead the struggle for equality and equity for women, girls, indigenous peoples, migrants, refugees, LGBT people, and all those who are or who feel marginalized in our societies. These are issues Education International has put front and center since its inception. And as we put the structures in place for all those years ago, we included the Women's Caucus, which would convene at each World Congress, and a status of Women Committee tasked with advising the Executive Board on gender equality issues while we set strict gender quotas for our governing bodies. All 7 EI World Congresses adopted at least one, if not more, resolutions on specific aspects of gender equality in education, in unions, and in society. So we produced a lot of literature. I personally believe that over the past 25 years, the most significant contributions have been made by our regional women's networks. Many of you in this room today may be able to attest to the fact that these networks have been an invaluable tool for providing formal and informal support to increase your participation within your unions. And they have been a very important source of empowerment for many in the global education union movement. This reminds me of a story. It must have been at least 15 years ago. I was invited to dinner at the home of the General Secretary of one of our African member unions, the first woman holding that position. A couple of days earlier, that union had called for a teacher's strike to settle a labor conflict. While we were eating and discussing how Education International could support the strike, the phone rang. The General Secretary's husband stood up, walked from the table to the corner of the room and answered the call. "Yes, Mr. President," I heard him say, startled as he found himself talking to the head of state. "Of course, Mr. President," he said timidly, "but perhaps you should tell her yourself. She's right here. We're having dinner." I could hear a very loud voice on the other end of the line, and I saw the General Secretary's husband go pale. "But she's doing both, sir," I heard him say. And then the call was abruptly ended. He came back to the table and said, "It was the president," still in shock. "He told me to be a man and to take control, to have you look after the children and cook meals at home rather than allowing you to call for strike action." We looked at each other in silence for a couple of minutes, but then burst out in laughter. There was a strike. There was support from EI and the International Labour Organization, and the teachers got their pay raise. A couple of years ago, I ran into her at an ILO conference. She was no longer General Secretary, she was the Minister of Labour. Colleagues, I've seen great changes in our African region. 25 years ago, many African countries were one-party states with men, a very small group of men, I should add, dominating government, party, and trade union. Today, the old boys' networks are gradually disappearing. And where women have conquered leadership positions, we see trade unions taking a more independent stance. Apparently, and I should be very careful saying this, women seem to be less concerned about risking their personal careers than men are. But it's not only Africa where I've seen women taking the lead of national education unions in the past 25 years. Today, Our largest affiliates in the United States, in Canada, in Brazil, in Argentina, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Russia, in Germany, in the United Kingdom, in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in Hungary, in Bulgaria, in Israel, and in more countries. They are all led by women. Some of them present here in Marrakech, and as you know, they are doing a magnificent job. Almost 25 years ago, in 1995, EI and many of our member unions took part in the 4th United Nations World Conference on Women. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action are recognized as the most advanced international instruments on women's rights ever agreed, highlighting the importance of education to the empowerment of women and girls, the advancement of their rights, and as a means of achieving social justice. Today, it is proven beyond any doubt that education empowers women to have healthier families, to participate in their communities economically and politically, and to take on leadership roles at many different levels. Let me draw your attention to the first episode of the EI at 25 podcast series on women leaders, past and present, at EI, which is now available for you to enjoy. Colleagues, 25 years ago, we understood that education was the most effective tool to achieve gender justice and democracy. Today, we can all hear that truth resonating loudly in almost every country of the world. But not in all countries, I'm afraid. Let us here and now pay tribute to all these courageous women teachers who, despite resistance from extremist groups like the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan, or Boko Haram in Nigeria, refused to abandon their girl students and close their schools. And let me tell you, some paid with their lives. They were our front soldiers. Let's pay tribute to them today. In such a volatile, polarized, and unequal world, I believe Education International symbolizes our hope for better times to come. For we hold this still largely untapped potential of at least 20 million women teachers in 180 countries, able to rise to the occasion, to provide leadership to the teaching profession and the union movement, and to translate words into action, realizing that collective strength and vision is, in my opinion, the best way to both navigate the labyrinth and to bridge the equality gap. This conference can be another very promising step. So let's get down to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. When I started out as a teacher, and immediately also as a trade unionist, this thing, a lectern, was just about the greatest symbol of power I knew about. And I was dead scared of it. I started out leadership training, not in trade unions, but in the Sports Association in Norway. And went through a training that they had the title of Women Can, Women Want To, and Women Dare. At the end of that training, we had 2 tasks. It was to go home to our sports club in our local and promote ourselves to represent them at a regional conference. And the second challenge was to take the floor and speak from the lectern. I managed to get myself on the local delegation. I signed up. I went up to the lectern. I'd done everything right. I had my notes on small pieces of paper in, large letters and everything. And the first thing that happened was that my knees started shaking tremendously. Then my hands started shaking. I couldn't see what I'd written, and I have no idea what I said. That was how strong the symbol of power was of that lectern, and how much respect I had for the people who dared speak from it and to listen to what they say. We have an awful lot of symbols of power in society, an awful lot of tools of power. They can be very good and helpful, but we must also be aware of how we use them. And we mustn't be scared of using them, because we can, we want to, and we dare to push through that fear and use them in a proper way. We're now going to speak about power. Let's see if I get the first. Supposed to there. No, it's going wild on me here. So we go back to that, because I'm going to invite an amazing panel to come up to the stage. We have Susan Hopgood, the President of Education International and the General Secretary of the Australian Education Union. Susan. And then we have Nora Files, who's the head of the Secretariat of UNGAI, which is the UN Girls Education Initiative. She has worked a lot in the UN agencies, but also within, I would say, development cooperation around the world, and both on the ground around in the world and also at home in Canada. We have Katja Iversen, the President CEO of Women Deliver, who knows a lot about advocacy, communication, how to get people together to make a difference. I think you work a lot with, Katja, what I'm in a minute going to call for also influencers. Yes. And then we have Sora Louis. I'm not sure I pronounced your name correctly, I'm sorry, but a professor at the Moulay Ismail University here in Morocco. So an applause for these wonderful women. There's an awful lot of power sitting there. These are women that all hold power positions. You can achieve power through precision, and that's often what we talk about when we say women have to get into leadership positions. Of course, you all have power. You all have power in your own lives. Teachers, educators, they have power, enormous power in their professional life, in the classroom, or at the university. So there are very many ways of getting around power. Some of us don't like to talk about power. It's sort of a bit negative. But I think we have to turn that around. We have to see it as the possible way of creating change. I've been reflecting an awful lot the last week. What is really power? So I go to the dictionary first, and we sort of have the formal definitions. The ability to influence or outright control the behavior of people. Be aware of that in a powerful or in a power position, you can influence or change people, or you can even hold people down. The difference between positive and negative way of using your power in relation to other people. Lift them up or hold them down. The ability or capacity to do something or act in a particular way. That's when we want to make a change, our policy. We want something to happen on the ground. Then you have power. Or we can take a more informal statement on power. Power is the capacity to ensure that others do as you want them to do. If that sounds menacing or distasteful or makes you feel squeamish, I understand, and I invite you to get over it. That's what we're going to do. We're going to learn to take and grasp power as a positive tool and use it in a way where it can make a positive difference. If I go back just a little minute, that first definition, because I said to Katja that you probably work with influencers. It says the ability to influence or outright control. Power isn't always connected to a leadership position. I've seen now, at least in my country, and I'm sure in many other countries, you even have these influencers awards. Who has been the greater influencer in society the last year? And at least at home, they're bloggers, it can be reality stars, journalists, actors, but not necessarily people who have been employed in, appointed to, or elected to power positions. So there are very many ways that you can execute power. I've also thought about another word that starts with P that we often think about when we talk about power, and that's privilege. For some of us, we can see that some people have the privilege to achieve power. It may be through family, it can be through wealth, position in society, that it sort of seems to come easier than for others that have to work hard with it. But there's also the other part of privilege, and that's the privilege that comes with power when you have achieved it. How do you use that power? And I think that, for me, is part of the purpose of this panel, to get us all to reflect, not only how do we achieve the power, but what do we do with the power when we actually have it. I thought Ulrike's story about crossing on a red light yesterday was very good. It's also knowing that the moment you, in a powerful position, express a thought, some people will say that or perceive that as a command. So it's being very conscious of what power can do with us. So I would like to start, and I'm going to move and see if they manage to move the microphone. You hear me? You still hear me? I would like to start with our panel and ask them from their different perspectives to reflect a bit about what does power mean for you? What kind of thoughts do you have about it? We're going to start with Susan. You're from the trade union movement. You're in an elected power position, 2 places, and you've gone all through the system.
Well, thanks, Heldis, and good morning, everyone. I think when I was reflecting on these questions and this panel over the last few days, I realised that I was one of those people who sort of shied away from the notion that I actually had power. It seemed to me anyway, sort of in a way to be seen as a negative rather than a positive. And so, like I did what everybody does, or what lots of people do, I Googled and looked at definitions of power also, and I came up with another definition which made me laugh, really, I think, and I hope it might make you laugh and perhaps think as well. There is an archaic definition of power. That is a definition that is no longer used, and that is, it is a force of armed men. Armed men. Now, actually, it's not a bad definition, and we can see in the past why it would have been a definition of power. And in some respects, perhaps if we take the armed bit out, or we think about being armed in all sorts of different ways, it's not just armed in a violent way, that is definitely what power has been about, of course, a force of men and the way men have used that power. So that made me reflect about me as a woman and if I have power, which I must accept, how is my power derived, or what is my power derived from? And this takes me to the fact that I'm an elected leader of a trade union. in my own country, and of course Education International. And I think that's what makes my power slightly different, I think, and all of our power in this room different to the power people have from organisations that are not membership based. Because that's my point. I mean, I think my power comes from the fact that I represent members, that it is an organisation of members, and without those members I have no power. And my power also comes from the fact that the organisation itself, the trade union itself, is a respected organisation. And because without that respect in the community, in society, then that power doesn't exist as well. So for me, that power first and foremost comes from the membership. And it comes from the membership, I guess, a membership which is acting together. It's the membership that has a desired purpose, is working toward having a united common purpose, which is what, of course, we do as education unions. And so most importantly, I think that power, and I could use different words, it's authority, it's influence, it's the ability to advocate, it's all of those things, but in the end, it is a collective power. It's not an individual power. It is a power which comes from the power of the collective. And so, as a union leader, that's how I see power, that power to influence, to lobby, to advocate around issues for the membership, but deriving from the membership itself. Thanks, Elders.
Thanks a lot, Susan. I think we're going to jump. We're going to jump to Nora. That you're in a UN agency that, some would see it as sort of the bureaucratic global organizations. How do you perceive power working in that environment?
Thank you very much, and it's a delight to be with you. You introduced me as being within a UN organization, which is true, but like Susan, I represent a partnership. And so I have a very unusual position of taking the authority of the UN, which opens lots of doors, and the authority of the UN, and which closes a lot of other doors. Mm-hmm. And I need to manipulate or make my way through this labyrinth. And I've had a really interesting run of it over the last 5 years. I wanted to start by saying, you as men and women in unions are probably the experts on power in organizations. But I have had some time at the Government of Canada and now these 5 years at the UN, so I've learned a few things along the way as well. I've been asked to talk a little bit about power in organizations, and it's a really interesting process to think about that a little bit, of power through, in, and over. We've heard of some of those ways of describing power. But organizations, big ones and small ones, are all fundamentally political. And so it's about allocating power and how people will use it. It's about who talks in a meeting, and about who makes decisions, who actually approves a policy which sets the rules for an entire organization, and then who determines the culture of that organization. Often, and especially in hierarchical organizations like governments, like UN agencies, I hate to admit, it's a position. It's the manager who is given authority over a team, over our employees, determine how they work and what will be achieved. And they have the potential to, as I'd mentioned before, do power over, to insist that people do their bidding, or to work power through and power with, to achieve the same outcome, or maybe a different one, with the team. And I have to say, you've been on both of those, in both of those situations, I'm sure, at least I have. And the culture and the feeling in the process is very different. There's also the allocation of budget and other important resources. And we do also know that experience of being at the bottom of the list of who's going to get those few resources, who's going to get that extra person to work with them, or who's going to be invited to take that course or attend that conference. all those decisions are, and all those goodies are passed out through a process of power and authority. It certainly makes a difference on the feeling of that individual or the functioning of the organization. Control and authority is also managed through hidden power, sometimes called agenda-setting power. It's about who influences and set the agenda behind the scenes. When we smoked, it was really easy to see where the power was happening, and in some cultures you can exchange this kind of power on the golf course. But there are also other circles of influence, of hidden power, of setting the agenda type power, and whether we use it effectively or not, whether we use it to undermine and set people against each other, or whether we use it to just strategically ensure that the agenda is moving the direction in which we hope to see it. That's our choice many times. All individuals hold and bring to an organization a different type of power, social or historic power, who we're related to, where we come from, what we look like. And these realities, when they remain below the surface, they can be very destructive, and they can change the organization. But when we make them explicit, they can be sources of a different kind of power, a power to make change, a power to undermine the deep structure of inequality in organizations, and use our power for equality and gender equality in organizations. And it's worth it, although it does sometimes get you in trouble.
Thank you, Nora. Katja, you from Women Deliver. You know, I remember what Ulrike said yesterday about claiming space. You are really working on trying to create or convene that space on a global level for women. What does power mean in that context?
Thanks a lot. And is it on? Yes, it's on. And I am so happy to be here, and so is my mother. She's a teacher. So was my dad. And I was supposed to be one too, but I saw how hard that work was. So I chose to be an international leader instead. So that's what brings me here. All research shows that you'll remember a maximum of 3 things of what I say, not because you're not smart, but because there's been so much deliciousness going on here. And if I could have any influence on what those 3 things was, I have learned that if you want something, then ask for it. Those 3 things would be women deliver, and so much more than babies. They are not victims, they are powerhouses, and when you invest in them, there's a ripple effect, and everybody wins. When you invest in their health, in their rights, and not least in their education. And educators hold such a key to this. #women lead. Number 2, power comes in many forms. It's personal, it's political, it's structural, it's soft, it's hard. But the most important thing is that we need to grab it and use it for good. If there's some benefit to yourself, fine, but we're here to change the world. That's why we're doing what we're doing. Power is not a zero-sum game. It's not as if, it's a little bit like rights. If I kind of have my rights, it's not that I'm taking them away from you, but power is not necessarily a zero-sum game. That is a masculine view on power. It's not if you win, I lose. It can be a win-win, and that's what Women Deliver is doing. We believe that when we lift each other up, when we work together across sectors, across issues, there's a little bit of our claim to fame that we really can get the different sectors together, because together we are stronger. Number 3, Vancouver, 3rd to 6th June 2019, Prime Minister Trudeau, be there or be square. Next year we'll have the largest conference in the world on gender equality, gender justice, and girls and women, and it'll be in Vancouver, and I invite you to be there, because when we meet all the sectors together, we want education to be there well represented, because if we want to change the world, and we do, that is key that it's there. It's not only fun and inspirational, it's 6,000 to 7,000 people from world leaders, celebrities, royals, everything in between, that'll be there. So it's a real game changer. Now let me ask you quickly, how many of you have heard about Women Deliver before you came here? Ooh, there's some. Thank you, that's great. Not many. We don't work kind of in a big public space and have public campaigns. We don't have members. We have a lot of associations. We have a network of 2,500 organizations from different sectors across the globe, 30,000 advocates. But they work politically and they work in organizations. And our core goal is to lift girls and women up, to really focus on how girls and women drive development for everybody and how we need to invest in it. We only do advocacy. We don't do service delivery. We don't do water posts. We don't do training programs. We don't do all of that. But we get people together. We convene and we connect. And we use that power that is, we're not appointed, we're not elected, but we have grabbed a space that people want to come together around. We have built a platform, we connect, we share. So when, when I 1 week is together with one prime minister or president or hang out with some celebrities or whatever we do, we're happy to share a lot of that. We have, kind of on speed dial, a lot of the influencers, the head of the UN agencies and things like that. We don't kind of flash it and kind of say, woohoo, we spoke to. But we really are kind of using it for a broader common good. So we're small, we fit in one room. That's not true because we actually broke the wall to the next room last Friday. But we work in that way. And now I want to share a quote with you because there's many good P words like power, patriarchy. Pippi Longstocking, you know her? She's the strongest woman and the strongest girl in the world. And she said, if you're strong, you need to be good. You need to be kind. And my interpretation is, if you have power, if you're strong, you need to use it for good and you need to change the world. I have a lot of more points, but I can see time is running, so let me give it back to you, Alice.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to go to Sora and another kind of leadership position. And that goes to our profession of leading, having a leadership position in higher education, in an educational institution, and also in an academic sphere. Can you share your thoughts on the power? I'm going to speak in French, I think.
Yes. Bonjour tout le monde. J'ai vraiment la joie d'être parmi vous. Je voudrais d'abord préciser une chose avant de commencer. C'est que mon apprentissage du pouvoir vient de la politique. J'ai travaillé, j'ai œuvré, j'ai milité dans un parti politique pendant longtemps et je pense que le labyrinthe de la politique n'est pas des moindres. Il est même trop dur, cruel. D'un autre côté, on peut penser qu'à l'université, les choses seraient plus simples. Parce que l'université est le lieu du savoir, le lieu du dialogue, le lieu de la recherche des valeurs démocratiques. Et on peut penser donc que la concurrence serait moins rude, peut-être moins cruelle, que les hommes sont plus cultivés, c'est des chercheurs. Mais malheureusement, il n'en est rien. Pour s'imposer à l'université, il faut d'abord être crédible. Et quand je dis crédible, c'est au niveau de la recherche que nous réalisons. Il faut d'abord que nous soyons de vrais chercheurs crédibles, reconnus sur le plan national ou international pour avoir une autorité scientifique. Si nous n'avons pas cette autorité scientifique, nous ne pouvons pas occuper de place de pouvoir, être des vrais leadership femmes. Donc, les femmes, non seulement elles doivent s'imposer avec leur personnalité, mais elles doivent aussi être de bons chercheurs avec eux à la fin, ou chercheuses, comme vous voulez. Alors, il faut aussi avoir publié, parce que la recherche n'est pas simplement dans les communications ou dans les articles, mais il faut aussi publier et donc être reconnu. Cette reconnaissance scientifique est la base des fonctions dirigeantes. Donc, si le bilan de la recherche réalisée est moyen, il n'y a aucune chance donc d'être reconnu et d'être aussi plébiscité pour arriver au haut de la pyramide à l'université. Alors, ensuite, il y a les autres critères, bien évidemment. Il y a la disponibilité, il faut être disponible. Je pense que ça, c'est pareil dans tous les domaines. Il faut aussi avoir le contact facile. Il faut avoir l'audace dans la prise de décision. Il faut être ferme, des fois, même si des fois, comme quelqu'un l'a dit avant moi, même si la fermeté des fois blesse. Il faut aussi travailler d'une façon collaborative, c'est important. Mais le travail collaboratif ne veut pas dire qu'il ne faut pas des fois prendre des décisions urgentes. Il faut oser prendre des décisions urgentes quand cela s'impose et quand vous n'avez pas le temps de consulter. Il faut aussi de la patience, beaucoup de patience. Et il faut, quand nous prenons des décisions, il faut que nos décisions soient bien réfléchies et donc infaillibles. Sinon, on n'a plus confiance en nous. Et ça, c'est vraiment quelque chose à laquelle je tiens. Alors, le pouvoir est une question de plusieurs années d'expérience. Le pouvoir s'acquiert, le pouvoir s'apprend. Et je pense que quand on arrive à un certain niveau des expériences, il va falloir partager ces expériences avec les autres femmes, il me semble. Alors, moi, je suis dans plusieurs structures dirigeantes à l'université. J'ai été chef de département pendant 3 mandats, donc pendant 9 ans. J'ai été aussi dans des commissions de recrutement. Mais malheureusement, ce que nous remarquons à l'université marocaine, c'est que la présence des femmes dans ces commissions est presque insignifiante. Je dirais que des fois, il y a des commissions à 100% hommes. Et donc, il va falloir œuvrer dans ce sens-là pour que les femmes participent un peu plus. Alors, j'ai l'espoir dans les jeunes femmes qui rejoignent l'université. Alors, je suis actuellement directrice d'un centre de recherche et, bien évidemment, j'ai dans ce centre de recherche environ 140 membres. Dans ces membres, il y a très peu de femmes, donc une majorité d'hommes. Et je vous assure que diriger un centre de recherche n'est pas une mince affaire, surtout que le bureau où je suis, le bureau de direction, est fait d'hommes, entièrement d'hommes. Voilà, et je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, all of you. I thought that was very enriching to get the different perspectives. I think we now all, I hope, start reflecting what power can be, what is it for you? Start that reflecting, all of you. I'm wondering if I can get the slides up on the screen again. And I have a last one here. I hope I'm not offending anyone by this. It's not my quote, it's from Kathy Caprino from the Omega's Women's Leadership Center. Patriarchy, domination of men over women, has been around for about 5,000 years, which is relatively short in human history. It has been perpetuated by the idea that the inequality in power is inherent and has been a foundation for dividing us in other ways, including race, class, country of origin, religion, and sexuality. But patriarchy arose out of a complex set of historical conditions, overcoming the primarily egalitarian relationships of indigenous cultures that preceded it. Therefore, we know it can be transformed. It's time to move away from power over to power with. And to me, that echoes what some of you said. And it's about this, again, being conscious of how you use power and what you want to achieve with it. We're going to do another round with the panelists. And I'm going to ask you to also tell some stories. You started with stories from your experience with being in power positions. If I think back, when was the first time it sort of hit me? You have power. I think the first time it hit me, it goes back to, I think it was around 1990. I was a classroom teacher. 12-year-olds. I'd been working with older children before that, and I must say the teenagers don't necessarily idolize their teacher always. But I came into this room of 11, 12-year-olds, and after a month or so, one of the parents contacted me and said, you know, they love you, but it's beginning to be a challenge. Because every day when my daughter comes home, she wants to dress the way you dressed yesterday. She wants to do what you did. And, you know, in one way it was great, in another way it made me scared. Just thinking about the power you had in a position where people look up to you or want to learn from you, and being very careful on how you exercise that, so you make sure that people keep their individual way through life and their own likes and dislikes, that they don't have to be exactly like you. My second experience was as a trade unionist. 5 or 6 years later, I was a regional leader. And we've had a complicated, not time, but a topic in the union. Very democratic, asked for opinions from all the members and all the locals and the workplaces. It's been summarized at the national level. And then, of course, you have to make difficult decisions. This transformation from what we really want to what is the next step that is possible. That's difficult. And it's part of being a leader that you may have to convince people that we have to go with something that isn't absolutely perfect, but is halfway perfect. And I'd convened all the local leaders, there were 20 locals in my region, and prepared myself well to convince them that this is the good strategy, a good way to move forward, and expected a lot of criticism. I held my speech and the room was silent. That also scared me, because I knew these were people who had a lot of opinions, who should challenge me, should ask why, you know, why aren't we doing this, why aren't we doing that? It was not me, it was the power of the position. That I stood there as their leader, and they heard I was telling them what to do, instead of saying, this is my advice, and give me your advice. That also was a moment of reflection. And I'm sure that you have all had moments and thoughts of how to use power in a good way through your careers. Now, Nora, you also work through empowering girls, giving them power within themselves and through education.
Thanks very much. What a great opportunity. I have to say that my first story is about being a person of totally non-power. I grew up in a family with 2 siblings who were larger than life and 9 and 10 years older than me. And the story was always of me sitting under the table and shouting at my siblings saying, well, you just think you're the big boss, and wanting the credibility to have a real conversation with them. Well, that never happened at home. And since then, I have been, let us say, surprised by power and influence. So I haven't stepped into this asking for that, but it's been made available to me. I was once given the title of a warrior activist, a badge I wear with honor. The way I use my power, have done, especially over the last little while, is from the inside of an organization to influence others, not by leading, but by leading from behind, let us say. My agenda, in terms of the empowerment of girls, is to influence the global community to do 3 things: to keep girls in school and learning, to shine a light on gender and power dynamics which play out in schools, which we don't always talk about. We talk about the first one, keeping girls in school and learning. We don't always pay attention to gender and power dynamics in schools. And also, to encourage and support the global community to remember that if we want to see the transformative power of girls' education or education in girls' lives, then education has to transform. It must change. Because the way we're doing it now is not having the outcome we're hoping it will. So let me tell you about a few ways in which I have been working over the last 3 or 4 years to advance that agenda. The first one really took place around the setting of the global vision and the global goals, which we now look to on a regular basis. I was invited, using this UN title once again, remember that one, to go to Incheon, where the global community was setting the vision for the next 15 years. And when we saw this paper which described our vision, you know, cook these things up before you get to the meeting. Well, gender equality was hidden inside a little paragraph on the quality of education. Well, I didn't think that was quite up to what we wanted to see as our vision for education over the next 15 years. So I got a couple of others who are members of this partnership, the UN Girls Education Initiative, and we worked the room. And we got to know who was holding the pen, who were the powerful influencers who were going to make sure that that vision was as crisp and as representative of our intent. And by the end of that conversation, our vision included language like, we are committed to eliminating gender-based discrimination and violence in schools. That vision had a whole paragraph on gender equality, and we've never looked back. And that same vision was then translated into Agenda 2030. And I can just read my own words in that document, which was published by UNESCO, which tells us what are the intentions, what are the approaches which we will all now use to advance the SDGs, both 4 and 5. And so there's this target which speaks about, target 4.8, which speaks about the learning environment as being gender sensitive and violence-free. So that was a very effective way of making sure that our agenda was in our hands at all times over the next 15 years, working from behind. Now, the second way I have been being a warrior activist, let's say, is to target those institutions which are most powerful and ensure that they take on our agenda. And so I targeted the Global Partnership for Education, which you may, if you've been reading the news lately, raised over $2 billion with donors and others to advance education over the next 3 years. It brings together all of the big donors, all the big partners in education. Well, we have been, with others in the UNGAI, have been seeking ways of influencing that partnership, of getting inside that partnership, of getting gender equality and girls' education to be part of the lifeblood of the GPE. And I helped them write their gender policy, their gender strategy, and now when they talk about what they're doing, they're actually talking about what I'm doing, what UNGAI is doing, which is to support educators in ministries of education to take on a gender lens when they do their planning, to insist that the education sector plans respond to the needs of girls and boys, and that are monitored against those same indicators. And I also identified who else sets the agenda anyway. Well, the UNESCO Global Monitoring Report, or what we call now the Global Education Monitoring Report, which reports on an annual basis on where are we in education anyway. Those big books which you can break your foot on if you drop it. Well, I insisted that they pull out all the gender knowledge and put it in something that we could look at rapidly. So now, and I used my little budget, it's kind of crazy. I took UNICEF money, which they give me a little bit of, and I gave it to UNESCO to write the gender review, pulling out what we know about education. So that now, on an annual basis, you can Google the GMR Gender Review or the Global Education Monitor Gender Review, and you can see what are we thinking about now. And it's become the global reference point. So working from the inside has been really effective. And one third way I have really pleased to talk about is the way we have created a movement around a critical gender issue in education, which has been pretty quiet up until maybe 5 years ago, and which includes the work that you're doing as well. About 5 years ago, we started saying, well, how can we put a flashlight, a laser light, on gender violence in schools? I knew that some organizations over here and over there and there were doing some work on this, but it was a new issue in education. Our gender equality colleagues have made a lot of noise about domestic violence, about gender-based violence broadly in society, but educators didn't talk about it. It was a secret. But by convening, using the convening power of Vungai, we brought together all of those who cared about this gender issue in education. We launched a working group, and we designed with EI, with the help of some of your organizations, under the leadership of Madeline, but others as well, to put together a project which allowed teachers to take a lead on this, to change the myths about what is gender-based violence in schools about anyway. To say that it's not just about teachers perpetrating violence. They are victims, they are perpetrators, so are teachers and students and community members. To change the dialogue about what that is and to create a movement. We now have seen a plethora of reports, new data, new information, new understanding of what works. But it was about finding that connection between a fundamental gender issue, a core element of women's movement, connecting it to the education sector and opening the power of that collaboration across a number of organizations who are all committed to seeing that change. So I'm going to stop there, but that's 3 ways in which I've been stirring the pot and using whatever energy and power I have to make a difference.
Thank you, Nora. That's great. I love the way you also tell the story that power, when you're executing power, it isn't always visible. That the invisible work that we do on influencing is sometimes even more important than the visible work. And I'm sure many of you in your unions do that too. Remember my union, that we even, we wrote speeches for parliamentarians that they didn't need to reference us at all, because it was about what you achieve, not necessarily having your name detached all the time. Katja, what are your stories in your space, in your activist role around the world?
So it's both a personal and political story. When I hear something like this, I get all these ideas. And that's the power of stories. You hear something of what Nora said, and you think, oh, I remember that one, and I remember that situation. Oh, that's also me. That's the power of stories, and let's never forget that. It's not about the data, but it's the stories. That's what touches our hearts. So I come from a little 800 people rural village in the boonies in Denmark. We were 3 from my class that got out. The rest are still there. They married the neighbor. They are active in the sports organization. That's mainly what you can do, apart from going to church. So that's where I come from. My grandparents were a lot more international, and I got that from them, that the world is a good place, and people are not scary. They are actually they are friends that you not necessarily have met yet. So the road to where I am today, basically, I'm not exactly a size 4. I'm not exactly that what you would call the standard beauty, and all those different things. But so now where I am today, where I'm an advisor to the president of the G7, Prime Minister Trudeau, on gender equality for the next G7. I'm an advisor to Unilever, one of the world's biggest companies, advisor to the African Development Bank on driving investment in gender equality. I get to sit on stages like this and I just pinch myself. And I look at how on earth did that happen? And I don't have a lot of illusion that it's about me. I know it's also about my title. It's about an organization that has a tremendously good brand, even if not all of you have heard about it yet. But that's a journey, and there's been many choices. There's particularly one choice. One was to leave the community. That was a big one. The other one was I was not so happy, but I was a middle manager bureaucrat in the UN system, and had managed to build some good partnerships there and worked with other agencies, which is not always popular if you know the UN well. And I'd helped this very charismatic woman, Jill Sheffield, who founded Women Deliver 10 years ago, and helped her set it up because I could see rallying all decision makers, everybody who can move and shake around girls and women, at that time mainly maternal mortality, because at that time every minute a woman died in childbirth. Today it's every 2 minutes, still not good, way too bad. But so I had helped her because I could see from the UN they could never get a nimble organization that could move fast, because that's not in the UN system's way. So I'd helped her set that up. I'd been her advisor for 7 years on advocacy and communication, and then she got a little older and she said to me, I want you to take it over. And I was kind of, oh, well, no. You don't follow a founder, and you don't follow a legend. So I resisted for a couple of years, and the board came, and you kind of give us all your argument for why you don't want it. And I kind of listed them, and there were many. And then they just kind of debunkled all of them. And then at some point I looked at myself, because I'd been preaching that women should step it up, and they should just go for it, and they should claim the power and the space, and I was just hiding in the UN bureaucracy. So I thought, okay, maybe it's time to take my own medicine, and what's the worst that can happen? My biggest scare was, of course, doing it good enough, because we all have that. I think, women are socialized into that, imposters. Are we really good enough, and when will they find out that we're not? But it was to let girls and women down, because it was such an important organization, it was such an important mandate, and what if I couldn't do it? Overcome that. Today we have tripled our budget. We're still small. We are now 35 people and not 11 as when I started 4 years ago. And we have the largest platform. And it's not about me, it's about good people and good collaboration. Our secret, so that's been quite the journey for me personally. And I, for Women Deliver, and how is it that we can do what it is that we do with limited resources? First, when we get a new idea or a new task, we don't think, how are we going to do it? We always think, with whom are we going to do it? We always think partnership. We always work partnerships. We always think, who are more powerful than us? Who can move more mountains than us? And who can we go and nudge or invite in for a cup of coffee? EI, how many do you organize? 32 million educators across the globe. Women Deliver, 30 people in one room in Soho. No, not exactly it's a David and Goliath, but I think we can work together and make change happen. And that's what we do. We look at who can do things that we can collaborate with, and that's very, very important. We don't look at status. We really invite people in, and not just invite them into our table, but we go out as well. So that's absolutely key. The other one is, we're good at getting the different arguments. We're good at giving people what they need. So evidence, data, arguments, collate that. One of the reasons why I'm so happy to work with Nora, because are we experts in girls' education? No, but we work with people who are, so we don't need to be it. And we work together in a global campaign that's called Deliver for Good with people from all sectors, so we can share. And that is such a powerful thing. The transaction cost of having to do everything yourself and working in silos are tremendous, but the evidence, and then developing the investment case. When I came to this area, particularly in women's health back then, there was hardly any data on the investment case. Why would you invest? What would you invest in, and what would the benefit be? Do I like that we have to do that? No, I wish we could kind of lean on human rights and say it's a right to education, it's a right to health, but we know that everybody has the right to everything, and if you go to a Minister of Finance, that's not going to be the denominator of what you choose. So developing the investment case with, for example, the World Bank, McKinsey, and all of those, where we now can document that if we had gender equality in the workplace, we could add 26% to global GDP. Now, that's not pocket money. That is the combined economy of US and China. But helping drive those arguments, so we both have the technical argument, the economic argument, and the rights argument. That is key, and we do that. As I said before, we connect. We're not kind of hiding our information or kind of shielding it and kind of saying, oh, we have all these connections. But we're really good at making them and say, for some people, for me, that's something we have and we can share it. So that connecting people and connecting the dots and communicating in a way that both speaks to the heart and the head. You know, as human beings, we're not convinced by facts only. It's also what moves us. You know, evidence shows that you will remember that only 8% of what you take away from this session will be about what we're saying. The rest is about how we say it and about how we make you feel. So realizing that in communication is so important. And then also realizing a lot of the change and building this global movement for girls and women, it comes from not always wanting to claim the victory, so we often take our logo off and say it's about the issues, it's not about us. That's not really good for fundraising, but and my fundraisers often say that, but it is important if we really want to move the agenda. So that's kind of some of the things we do as Women Deliver, and we are on a journey from starting in maternal health, as the word Women Deliver indicates, and now kind of have it that it's much more, it's a holistic gender view. It is looking at the girl and a woman, not as a body part or a sector or an issue, but as a whole woman and looking at the life course and where is it that we need to work and where is it we need to invest. So, thanks.
Thank you, Katja. For me, that was a fantastic story also of collaborative leadership. That is not necessarily about the individual. The individual is the facilitator of being able to mobilize good leadership and power. Susan, you have worked in our movement, in the trade union movement, also as a mathematics teacher, but you have this unique combination of being a top leader nationally and also internationally. But you also had a journey until you came there, and you've been working, I know, passionately on women's rights all through your journey. I believe that was one of your first positions in the AEU at the federal level?
Well, yes. In fact, before that, my first position with the Education Union was in a state branch, not in a national branch, as a women's officer. So it is true that my journey, in part, has begun with advocating for women and girls. It's also true that when you listen to everyone's stories, you want to tell different stories, and you think you're going to say something, and then you think, no, that's not what I was going to say, I should say this. And so I want to start a little bit back. I mean, my journey, in fact, was very similar to yours, Katja, because, I came from a very rural community, which was, a small community, religious community. My parents had no opportunities to go to school beyond the age of 14, came from a family which was very committed to education and learnt very early about the power of education to change lives. That was my first story. The second story is that I learnt about collective power when I was a university student, when I joined movements at that time in the 1970s, movements against standing up against apartheid in South Africa. In Australia, it was a movement against conscription of 20-year-old men, actually, 20-year-olds, conscription to fight in a war that which should never have happened, the Vietnam War. And I learnt at that time about the collective power of standing up, that if we could come together, go out into the streets, demand change from our government and governments around the world collectively, then that change can occur. So that was probably my first, my first realisation about that collective power. And I took that, I think, into my teaching and into, of course, then my immediate, upon becoming a teacher and joining the workforce, being a member of the Education Union, because having understood that, I understood the importance of the collective strength. And so I think, those experiences of mine I've carried with me throughout. Then, of course, for me as a woman teacher, I realised very quickly, and as a member of the union, that in fact women didn't have the same positions, the same opportunities as men, either in the teaching profession, which I had joined, or in the union, which I was a member of. So then I took that and realised that we could use collective power to make those changes as well. So that was the next, I suppose, point in my journey, which then led me, of course, eventually to stand up for election in my union, to become a union delegate, eventually to become an elected leader. That's over a very, very long period of time. None of that was short. But I have a memory, though, of when I first stood for and became a delegate at the union, on the Union Council. And at that time, the Union Council had 75% men and 25% women. I had actually become a delegate as part of a push by the leadership at that time to increase the number of women on our council. So very much part of it was exactly that. But I remember my very first Union Council meeting. I was young, relatively, and I was nervous. And I was really desperate. Somebody talked about this yesterday, I think. I was really desperate to actually make my mark at this council meeting. And I was sort of sitting there thinking, in this debate, when am I going to put up my hand? What am I going to say? Will I be able to get my idea across? I was very, very anxious. And I realised that what was happening in the room was that the 75% of participants who were men were having no problems at all getting their hands up, saying what they wanted to say, which was usually exactly what the person before them had said, actually. Usually wasn't a new idea. And eventually I put up my hand and very timidly, and in those days I used to blush. I can still blush, actually. I can probably make myself blush right now. Sort of red-faced, timidly put up my hand and made what I thought was a really good point. But I realised after that this was not the way to actually bring about change. If I wanted to participate, I had to actually be prepared to stand up and actually be me. Actually be me, not try and do what those around me were doing and just repeating arguments and, just for the sake of talking, that I didn't need to speak, actually, if I didn't have a good idea. That's a bit of a challenge, I think, for us, really, because otherwise, if we don't speak out, we don't have a voice. But on the other hand, as women, I think, if I can make a generalisation, we only want to speak out when we actually know that we have an important thing to say. So all of that actually helped me with my journey, and I hope helps me bring about collective power for women in our union, whether it be at the national level, my own union, the Australian Education Union, or whether it be Education International as a leader of Education International. But I go back to the point that I made at the beginning when I had my first intervention, and that was that all of this is about a collective power. My power only derives from speaking on behalf of and speaking for members, and in particular women members. So what does that mean for Heldis? I'm just warming up, so you should actually intervene and tell me when I should stop. Okay, thank you. So, I mean, what does that actually mean in reality? Well, I think I can say similar things for a national union and for an international union. It absolutely means that if our organisations are going to be organisations that give women power, because that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Give women power, not just about me having power, not just about the elected leader having power, but giving the women members power, then we've got to make sure our organisations are organisations that actually women feel comfortable in. We've got to make sure our organisations are organisations that actually advocate for the issues for women. We've got to make sure that our organisations have structures which don't demean women, don't belittle women, but actually allow women to stand up and feel comfortable about making their point. And we have to make sure that, in fact, our organisations are organisations which meet the needs of the our diverse membership and our diverse societies and communities. And as women, we have that responsibility, I think, that special responsibility as well. And you can give me all the answers to that. I don't need to tell you what that actually means. You know, obviously it means, you know, how we run our meetings. It obviously means when we run our meetings. It means when we develop a log of claims, are we actually making sure that we are addressing the issues for women, the issues that make it possible for women to fulfil all of the lives, all of the parts of their lives, being at work or family responsibilities and so on. It means addressing all those issues like family and domestic violence, making sure that our women members have the sorts of leave that they need to be able to do their job. It means we advocate for girls and young women when we are as teachers, because we only don't advocate for industrial issues, but we advocate for professional issues as well. So it's making sure we do those things. It means that we actually do provide the space for women to be able to meet on their own and talk about the issues, but not only provide that space, but to actually allow and enable those issues to be then put back onto the agenda of the union. And it reminds me of a little story. When I first started doing international work, I was working with a number of unions in a sub-region, and many of those unions had women's wings of the union. And they were really active and strong, the women's wings. The women met and they developed issues and they, worked together, talked about what their problems were. But you know what? They never ever got an opportunity for those issues to be taken back to the mainstream union. So a women's wing was great, but it almost became a separate union. And that's not what we want either. So we want space for women, but we also need to make sure that that space is within the union as a whole. Otherwise, we make no changes. And we don't bring them in with us, which is absolutely important, because in the end, we all know that a union will change because the union wants to change, and that means because the overall membership wants to change. So for me, that's what it is, about how, as a woman leader, with some power, which has been invested by you and our members, what that means to me and what, I think I should be doing. But it's also about, as a collective, what we should be doing to make sure that women have the power to actually do the things that they want to do, actually do their jobs, actually participate in our unions, actually be active in their family lives and in society and stand up. If we do that collectively, if we use that power collectively, then we can make a real change. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. I love the way you collect that with the term of collective power. And I also think you brought us very close to the main theme of the conference again, the labyrinth, and sort of identifying what all of you had. But, what are the possible barriers that are there? And you were describing a lot of what I experienced in my training as a trade unionist primarily, but coming from Norway, I've been trained in the 10 suppression techniques that Berit Aas has developed. And if you don't know what they are, you can Google them. But it's everything. We've also translated them into Arabic. They're used globally. But it's everything of how you are made invisible, withhold all of the information, the damned if you do and damned if you don't, you know, and so on. And just the power of identifying when they're being used gives you the ability to move forward, identifying them. And there are lots of men out there that don't know that I've identified when they've used them. Because you don't always tell them, you just move on. But we are going to come to our last stories, and we're going to move back to the country we are in, to Morocco. We're going to move back to the university field. Now, I don't know if your stories are from the university, but please.
Bien, je vous remercie. J'aimerais commencer par une citation d'une grande sociologue marocaine à qui je rends hommage aujourd'hui, qui est la sociologue Fatima Mernissi, qui nous a quittés il y a 2 ans. Alors Fatima Mernissi a dit ceci, et c'est très important pour nous les femmes au Maroc. Elle a dit « Si tu ne peux pas quitter l'endroit où tu te trouves, tu seras du côté des faibles. » Ceci veut dire que les femmes marocaines doivent sortir de chez elles. C'est important. Sortir de chez elles ne veut pas simplement dire sortir de la maison, mais aussi sortir d'un carcan social. La société nous a enlisés dans une sorte de conservatisme qui relègue la femme toujours au second rôle. Alors, je vais commencer par dire que j'ai appris le pouvoir, effectivement, aux côtés de grandes dames. J'ai d'abord ma mère, à qui je rends hommage aussi aujourd'hui. Ma mère est une femme militante dans le social. Elle est à la tête d'une association qui vient en aide aux femmes en difficulté. Déjà donc dans mon enfance, dans mon adolescence. Ensuite, j'ai appris le pouvoir aux côtés de femmes généreuses parce qu'elles ont partagé le pouvoir avec moi en politique, mais aussi au syndicat. Au syndicat qui est le lieu où il y a très peu de femmes, il y a une secrétaire générale de notre syndicat, Madame Fouziek Dira, qui a été pour 2 mandats à la tête du syndicat de l'enseignement supérieur, ce qui est pour nous une bonne visibilité pour la femme marocaine syndicaliste. Donc, j'ai appris le pouvoir aux côtés de ces femmes et je ne peux pas dire que j'ai appris toute seule, j'ai appris avec ces femmes. Aujourd'hui, moi, dans ma position de femme puissante, entre guillemets, on n'est jamais puissant à 100%, il faut que je partage aussi mon expérience, mon pouvoir. Et c'est ce que je fais au quotidien. D'abord à l'université, parce qu'à l'université, j'essaye d'impliquer des femmes avec moi dans les commissions. Sur le plan national, dans les universités marocaines, nous constituons un réseau de femmes universitaires qui essayent de faire pression sur les présidents pour qu'il y ait un quota. C'est-à-dire que dans toutes les commissions, il faut respecter ce quota pour que les femmes viennent dans les commissions. Parce que s'il n'y a pas de quota, moi je suis convaincue que s'il n'y a pas de quota, même au niveau de la représentativité des femmes dans les organes de direction dans les universités, eh bien, la femme ne sera pas visible comme je l'aurais souhaité. Et c'est pour cela que j'œuvre aussi au niveau national pour que les femmes viennent dans ces commissions. Il y a aussi autre chose, c'est qu'en tant que chercheur, j'organise aussi je suis à la tête d'une équipe de recherche sur la femme et j'organise des activités scientifiques sur les droits des femmes. Alors j'invite bien évidemment toutes les étudiantes pour assister et on travaille beaucoup sur les manuels scolaires, par exemple, montrer à quel point les manuels scolaires au Maroc sont injustes avec les femmes. Comment est-ce que les femmes sont très très mal représentées dans les manuels scolaires et nous savons toute l'importance des manuels scolaires dans la construction de la personnalité de l'enfant. Si, à ce niveau-là, nous ne faisons pas un effort pour montrer les failles dans l'éducation, nous, en tant que femmes, nous n'arriverons jamais à changer la situation. Donc, travailler au niveau... Alors, quand on sait que les commissions qui réalisent ces manuels scolaires sont à presque 95% masculines, qu'est-ce que nous pouvons attendre de tout cela? Il n'y a même pas le regard des femmes. Quand nous voyons que les images qui circulent dans ces manuels scolaires représentent les femmes dans la cuisine, dans le supermarché en train de faire des courses avec leur fille, pas avec le garçon. Non, mais c'est... Je veux dire, bon, il y a eu un effort, mais cet effort n'est pas suffisant, n'est pas encore suffisant. Nous demandons une réforme, une refonte totale des manuels scolaires. Alors, il y a peut-être un dernier point, si vous me permettez, Madame la Présidente, c'est le syndicat. J'ai beaucoup milité dans le syndicat, j'ai été au bureau national du syndicat et je déplore, là, bien sûr, la représentativité insignifiante. Et là aussi, nous devons travailler en réseau avec les femmes. Nous devons également instaurer et imposer le quota. Les collègues hommes au syndicat de l'enseignement supérieur refusent cette idée de quota, soi-disant que les femmes sont suffisamment instruites, suffisamment cultivées pour s'imposer. Moi, je dis qu'il faut le quota pour démarrer et pour justement donner confiance aux femmes pour qu'elles se présentent. Alors, je rends hommage aujourd'hui à toutes ces femmes qui m'ont aidée pour devenir ce que je suis aujourd'hui et je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Sora. I thought that was a great way for us to end this panel because you sort of wrapped it all up. You brought it down to the educational field, the importance of what we do in the learning situation and of our tools like textbooks, that they support us and not working against us. The importance of working with women, both in the trade union and in the academic field. We are supposed to lift each other up, support each other. And you also echoed what Susan said, that whatever tool we use, we must make sure that that is not putting women on the sideline, but that that tool, whether it's quotas or women's committees or networks, is actually opening the door for women to access the power positions. Thank you so much, wonderful women. Can you please give them an applause? They sort of thought they would be having another round and so on, but we don't have time for that because it's been so enriching with everything you've had to share so far. I hope you keep sharing your stories with each other and with us outside the room. We're going into a coffee break. You know the way it works. It's the same way as yesterday. You've chosen your sessions. You find the rooms. There are people to help you, and it's on the app. So, half an hour coffee break.